Chapter 13. Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. Text 1 through 2. Arjuna uvacha prakritim purusham chaiva kshetram kshetragyam evacha etad veditum ichami jnanam gyayam cha keshava Sri-Bhagavan uvacha idam shariram konteya kshetram iti abidyate etad yoveti tam prahu kshetragya iti tadvida. Arjuna uvacha. Arjuna said, Prakritim, nature, Purusham, the enjoyer, Cha, also, Eva, certainly, Kshetram, body, Kshetragyam, knower of the body, Eva, certainly, Cha, also, Etat, all this, Veditum, to understand, Ichami, I wish, Jnanam, knowledge, Gyayam, the object of knowledge, Cha, also, Keshava, O Krishna, Sri-Bhagavan uvacha, the personality of Godhead said, Idam, this, Shariram, body, Konteya, O son of Kunti, Kshetram, the field, Iti, thus, Abhidyate, is called, Etat, this, Ya, anyone, Veti, knows, Tam, him, Prahu, is called, Kshetragya, knower of the body, Iti, thus, Tat Vita, one who knows. Translation. Arjuna said, O my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the end of knowledge. The blessed Lord then said, This body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. Purport. Arjuna was inquisitive about Prakriti, or nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, Kshetra, the field, Kshetragya, its knower, and of knowledge, and the object of knowledge. When he inquired about all these, Krishna said that this body is called the field, and that one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. This body is the field of activity for the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul is entrapped in material existence, and he attempts to lord it over material nature. And so, according to his capacity to dominate material nature, he gets a field of activity. That field of activity is the body. And what is the body? The body is made of senses. The conditioned soul wants to enjoy sense gratification, and according to his capacity to enjoy sense gratification, he is offered a body, or a field of activity. Therefore, the body is called Kshetra, or the field of activity for the conditioned soul. Now, the person who identifies himself with the body is called Kshetragya, the knower of the field. It is not very difficult to understand the difference between the field and its knower, the body and the knower of the body. Any person can consider that from childhood to old age, he undergoes so many changes of the body, and yet is still one person remaining. Thus, there is a difference between the knower of the field of activities and the actual field of activities. A living conditioned soul can thus understand that he is different from the body. It is described in the beginning, Dehe Smin, that the living entity is within the body, and that the body is changing from childhood to boyhood, and from boyhood to youth, and from youth to old age. And the person who owns the body knows that the body is changing. The owner is distinctly Kshetragya. Sometimes we understand that I am happy, I am mad, I am a woman, I am a dog, I am a cat. These are the knowers. The knower is different from the field, although we use many articles, our clothes, etc. We know that we are different from the things used. Similarly, we also understand by little contemplation that we are different from the body. In the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad-gītā, the knower of the body, the living entity, and the position by which he can understand the Supreme Lord are described. In the middle 6 chapters of the Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the relationship between the individual soul and the Supersoul in regard to devotional service are described. The superior position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the subordinate position of the individual soul are definitely defined in these chapters. The living entities are subordinate under all circumstances, but in their forgetfulness they are suffering. When enlightened by pious activities, they approach the Supreme Lord in different capacities, as the distressed, those in want of money, the inquisitive, and those in search of knowledge. That is also described. Now, starting with the 13th chapter, how the living entity comes into contact with material nature, how he is delivered by the Supreme Lord through the different methods of fruitive activities, cultivation of knowledge, and the discharge of devotional service are explained. Although the living entity is completely different from the material body, he somehow becomes related. This is also explained. Text 3. Kshetragyam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra kshetragyayor jnanam yat taj jnanam matam mama. Kshetragyam, the knower. Cha, also. Api, certainly. Mam, me. Vidhi, know. Sarva, all. Kshetreshu, in bodily fields. Bharata, O son of Bharat. Kshetra, field of activities, the body. Kshetragyayo, the knower of the field. Jnanam, knowledge. Yat, that which is taught. Tat, that. Jnanam, knowledge. Matam, opinion. Mama, that. Translation. O scion of Bharat, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies. And to understand this body and its owner is called knowledge. That is my opinion. Purport. While discussing the subject of this body and the owner of the body, the soul and the Supersoul, we shall find 3 different topics of study: the Lord, the living entity, and matter. In every field of activities, in every body, there are 2 souls, the individual soul and the Supersoul. Because the Supersoul is the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, Krishna says, I am also the knower, but I am not the individual owner of the body. I am the super-knower. I am present in every body as the Paramatma, or Supersoul. One who studies the subject matter of the field of activity and the knower of the field very minutely in terms of this Bhagavad-gītā can attain to knowledge. The Lord says, I am the knower of the field of activities in every individual body. The individual may be the knower of his own body, but he is not in knowledge of other bodies. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present as the Supersoul in all bodies, knows everything about all bodies. He knows all the different bodies of all the various species of life. A citizen may know everything about his patch of land, but the king knows not only his palace, but all the properties possessed by the individual citizens. Similarly, one may be the proprietor of the body individually, but the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of all bodies. The king is the original proprietor of the kingdom, and the citizen is the secondary proprietor. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is the supreme proprietor of all bodies. The body consists of the senses. The Supreme Lord is Rishikesh, which means controller of the senses. He is the original controller of the senses, just as the king is the original controller of all activities of the state. And the citizens are secondary controllers. The Lord also says, I am also the knower. This means that he is the super-knower. The individual soul knows only his particular body. In the Vedic literature it is stated as follows: Kshetrani hi sharirani bijam chapi shubhashubhe tani veti sa yogatma tata kshetragya uchate. This body is called the Kshetra, and within it dwells the owner of the body. And the Supreme Lord who knows both the body and the owner of the body. Therefore he is called the knower of all fields. The distinction between the field of activities, the owner of activities, and the supreme owner of activities is described as follows. Perfect knowledge of the constitution of the body, the constitution of the individual soul, and the constitution of the Supersoul is known in terms of Vedic literature as jnanam. That is the opinion of Krishna. To understand both the soul and the Supersoul as one, yet distinct, is knowledge. One who does not understand the field of activity and the knower of activity is not in perfect knowledge. One has to understand the position of Prakriti, nature, and Purusha, the enjoyer of the nature, and Ishvara, the knower who dominates or controls nature and the individual soul. One should not confuse the three in their different capacities. One should not confuse the painter, the painting, and the easel. This material world, which is the field of activities, is nature, and the enjoyer of nature is the living entity, and above them both is the supreme controller, the personality of Godhead. It is stated in the Vedic language, Bhokta bhogyam preritaram cha matva sarvam proktam tri vidam brahmam etat. There are three Brahman conceptions. Prakriti is Brahman as the field of activities, and the jiva, individual soul, is also Brahman and is trying to control material nature. And the controller of both of them is also Brahman, but he is the factual controller. In this chapter, it will be also explained that out of the two knowers, one is fallible and the other is infallible. One is superior and the other is subordinate. One who understands the two knowers of the field to be one and the same contradicts the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who states here very clearly that I am also the knower of the field of activity. One who misunderstands a rope to be a serpent is not in knowledge. There are different kinds of bodies and there are different owners of the bodies. Because each individual soul has his individual capacity of lording it over material nature, there are different bodies. But the Supreme also is present in them as the controller. The word cha is significant, for it indicates the total number of bodies. That is the opinion of Śrīla Baladev Vijayabhushan. Krishna is the Supersoul present in each and every body apart from the individual soul. And Krishna explicitly says here that the Supersoul is the controller of both the field of activities and the finite enjoyer. Text 4. Tat kshetram yach cha yadrik cha yad vikari yatash cha yat sa cha yo yat prabhavash cha tat samasena me shrinu. Tat, that, kshetram, field of activities, yat, as, cha, also, yadrik, as it is, cha, also, yat, what is, vikari, changes, yata, from which, cha, also, yat, one, sa, he, Cha, also. Ya, one. Yat, which. Prabhava, cha, influence also. Tat, that. Samasena, in detail. Me, from me. Shrinu, understand. Translation. Now please, hear my brief description of this field of activity, and how it is constituted, what its changes are, whence it is produced, who that knower of the field of activities is, and what his influences are. Purport. The Lord is describing the field of activities and the knower of the field of activities in their constitutional positions. One has to know how this body is constituted, the materials of which this body is made, under whose control this body is working, how the changes are taking place, wherefrom the changes are coming, what the changes are, what the reasons are, what the ultimate goal of the individual is, and what the actual form of the individual soul is. One should also know the distinction between the individual living soul and the Supersoul, the different influences, their potentials, etc. One just has to understand this Bhagavad-gītā directly from the description given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all this will be clarified. But one should be careful not to consider the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every body and individual soul to be the jiva. This is something like equalizing the potent and the impotent. Text 5. Rishyabir bahuda gitam chandobir vividai pritak Brahma Sutra Padaishchaiva Hetum Madbir Venichitai. Rishibi, by the wise sages. Bahuda, in many ways. Gitam, described. Chandobi, Vedic hymns. Vividai, in various. Pritak, variously. Brahma Sutra, the Vedanta. Padai, aphorism. Cha, also. Eva, certainly. Hetumad be, with cause and effect. Venichitai, ascertain. Translation. That knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings, especially in the Vedanta Sutra, and is presented with all reasoning as to cause and effect. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the highest authority in explaining this knowledge. Still, as a matter of course, learned scholars and standard authorities always give evidence from previous authorities. Krishna is explaining this most controversial point regarding the duality and non-duality of the soul and the Supersoul by referring to scriptures, the Vedanta, which are accepted as authority. First, he says, this is according to different sages. As far as the sages are concerned, besides himself, Vyasadeva, the author of the Vedanta Sutra, is a great sage, and in the Vedanta Sutra, duality is perfectly explained. And Vyasadeva's father, Parashara, was also a great sage, and he writes in his books of religiosity, Aham tvam cha atanye. We, you, I, and various other living entities are all transcendental, although in material bodies. Now we are fallen into the ways of the three modes of material nature, according to our different karma. As such, some are on higher levels, and some are in the lower nature. The higher and lower natures exist due to ignorance, and are being manifested in an infinite number of living entities. But the Supersoul, which is infallible, is uncontaminated by the three qualities of nature, and is transcendental. Similarly, in the original Vedas, a distinction between the soul, the Supersoul, and the body is made, especially in the Katha Upanishad. There is a manifestation of the Supreme Lord's energy known as Annamaya, by which one depends simply upon food for existence. This is a materialistic realization of the Supreme. Then there is Pranamaya. This means that after realizing the Supreme Absolute Truth in foodstuff, one can realize the Absolute Truth in the living symptoms, or life forms. In Jnanamaya, the living symptom develops to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. Then there is Brahman realization, and the realization called Vijnanamaya, by which the living entity's mind and life symptoms are distinguished from the living entity himself. The next and supreme stage is Anandamaya, realization of the all-blissful nature. Thus there are 5 stages of Brahman realization, which is called Brahma Bhucham. Out of these first 3, Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Jnanamaya involve the fields of activities of the living entities. Transcendental to all these fields of activities is the Supreme Lord, who is called Anandamaya. In the Vedanta Sutra also, the Supreme is called Anandamayo Bhyasat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is by nature full of joy, and to enjoy his transcendental bliss, he expands into Vijnanamaya, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, and Annamaya. In this field of activities, the living entity is considered to be the enjoyer, and different from him is the Anandamaya. That means that if the living entity decides to enjoy, and dovetailing himself with the Anandamaya, then he becomes perfect. This is the real picture of the Supreme Lord as supreme knower of the field, the living entity, a subordinate knower, and the nature of the field of activities. Texts 6 through 7. Mahabhutani ahankaro buddhir avyaktam eva cha indriyani dashaikam cha pancha chendriya gochara icha dvesha sukham dukham sangatash chetana dritti etat kshetram samasena savikaram udaritam. Mahabhutani, great elements. Ahankara, false ego. Buddhi, intelligence. Avyaktam, the unmanifested. Eva, certainly. Cha, also. Indriyani, senses. Dasha ekam, 11. Cha, also. Pancha, 5. Cha, also. Indriya gochara, objects of the senses. Icha, desire. Dvesha, hatred. Sukham, happiness. Dukham, distress. Sangata, the aggregate. Chetana, living symptoms. Dritti, conviction. Etat, all this. Kshetram, field of activities. Samasena, in summary. Savikaram, interaction. Udaritam, exemplified. Translation. The 5 great elements: false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses, the mind, the 5 sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms and convictions. All these are considered, in summary, to be the field of activities and its interactions. Purport. From all the authoritative statements of the great sages, the Vedic hymns, and the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra, the components of this world are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. These are the 5 great elements. Mahabhuta. Then there are also false ego, intelligence, and the unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of nature. Then there are 5 senses for acquiring knowledge: the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and touch. Then 5 working senses: voice, legs, hands, the anus, and the genitals. Then above the senses there is the mind, which is within, and which can be called the sense within. Therefore, including the mind, there are 11 senses altogether. Then there are the 5 objects of the senses: smell, taste, warmth, touch, and sound. Now the aggregate of these 24 elements is called the field of activity. If one makes an analytical study of these 24 subjects, then he can very well understand the field of activity. Then there is desire, hatred, pleasure, and pain, which are interactions, representations of the 5 great elements in the gross body. The living symptoms represented by consciousness and conviction are the manifestation of the subtle body, mind, ego, and intelligence. These subtle elements are included within the field of activities. The 5 great elements are a gross representation of the subtle false ego. They are a representation in the material conception. Consciousness is represented by intelligence, of which the unmanifested stage is the 3 modes of material nature. The unmanifested 3 modes of material nature is called pradhan. One who desires to know the 24 elements in detail, along with their interactions, should study the philosophy in more detail. In Bhagavad-gītā, a summary only is given. The body is the representation of all these factors, and there are changes of the body, which are 6 in number. The body is born, it grows, it stays, it produces byproducts, then begins to decay, and at the last stage it vanishes. Therefore, the field is a non-permanent material thing. However, the kshetrajñā, the knower of the field, its proprietor, is different. Text 8 through 12. Amanitvam adambitvam ahimsa shantir arjavam acharyo pasanam shocham staryam atma vinigraha indriyarteshu vairagyam anahankara evacha janma mrityu jara vyadi dukkha doshanu darshanam asaktir ana bishvanga putra dara grihadishu nityam cha samachitatvam ishtanishto papatishu mai chananya yogena bhaktir avya bicharani vivikta desha sevitvam aratir jana samsadi adhyatma jnana nityatvam tattva jnanartha darshanam etaj jnanam iti proktam ajnanam yad ato niyata. Amanvitam, humility. Adambitvam, pridelessness. Ahimsa, non-violence. Kshanti, tolerance. Arjavam, simplicity. Acharya upasanam, approaching a bona fide spiritual master. Shocham, cleanliness. Staryam, steadfastness. Atma vinigraha, control. Indriya arteshu, in the matter of the senses. Vairagyam, renunciation. Anahankara, being without false egoism. Eva, certainly. Cha, also. Janma, birth. Mrityu, death. Jara, old age. Vyadi, disease. Dukkha, distress. Dosha, fault. Anudarshanam, observing. Asakti, without attachment. Anabhishvanga, without association. Putra, son. Dara, wife. Griha adishu, home, etc. Nityam, eternal. Cha, also. Sama-chitatvam, equilibrium. Ishta, desirable. Anishta, undesirable. Upapatishu, having obtained. Mai, unto me. Cha, also. Ananya yogena, by devotional service. Bhakti, devotion. Avya bicharani, constant, unalloyed. Vivikta, solitary. Desha, place. Savit vam, aspiring. Arati, without attachment. And jana, people in general. Samsadi, mass. Adhyatma, pertaining to the self. Jnana, knowledge. Nityatvam, eternity. Tattva jnana, knowledge of the truth. Artha, the object. Darshanam, philosophy. Etat, all this. Jnanam, knowledge. Iti, thus. Proktam, declared. Ajnanam, ignorance. Yat, that which. Ata, from this. Anyata, others. Translation. Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, and self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, non-attachment to children, wife, home, and the rest, and even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, resorting to solitary places, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization, and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I thus declare to be knowledge, and what is contrary to these is ignorance. Purport. This process of knowledge is sometimes misunderstood by less intelligent men as being the interaction of the field of activity. But actually this is the real process of knowledge. If one accepts this process, then the possibility of approaching the absolute truth exists. This is not the interaction of the tenfold elements as described before. This is actually the means to get out of it. Of all the descriptions of the process of knowledge, the most important point is described in the first line of the 10th verse. The process of knowledge terminates in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord. So, if one does not approach, or is not able to approach the transcendental service of the Lord, then the other 19 items are of no particular value. But if one takes to devotional service in full Krishna consciousness, the other 19 items automatically develop within him. The principle of accepting a spiritual master, as mentioned in the 7th verse, is essential. Even for one who takes to devotional service, it is most important. Transcendental life begins when one accepts a bona fide spiritual master. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, clearly states here that this process of knowledge is the actual path. Anything speculated beyond this is nonsense. As for the knowledge outlined here, the items may be analyzed as follows. Humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. The material conception of life makes us very eager to receive honor from others. But from the point of view of a man in perfect knowledge, who knows that he is not this body, anything, honor or dishonor, pertaining to this body is useless. One should not be hankering after this material deception. People are very anxious to be famous for their religion, and consequently sometimes it is found that without understanding the principles of religion, one enters into some group which is not actually following religious principles, and then wants to advertise himself as a religious mentor. As for actual advancement in spiritual science, one should have a test to see how far he is progressing. He can judge by these items. Nonviolence is generally taken to mean not killing or destroying the body. But actually, nonviolence means not to put others into distress. People in general are trapped by ignorance in the material concept of life, and they perpetually suffer material pains. So unless one elevates people to spiritual knowledge, one is practicing violence. One should try his best to distribute real knowledge to the people, so that they may become enlightened and leave this material entanglement. That is nonviolence. Tolerance means that one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. If one is engaged in the advancement of spiritual knowledge, there will be so many insults and much dishonor from others. This is expected because material nature is so constituted. Even a boy like Prahlad, who only 5 years old, was engaged in the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, was endangered when his father became antagonistic to his devotion. The father tried to kill him in so many ways, but Prahlad tolerated him. So for making advancement in spiritual knowledge, there may be many impediments, but we should be tolerant and continue our progress with determination. Simplicity means that without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. As for acceptance of the spiritual master, that is essential, because without the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master, one cannot progress in the spiritual science. One should approach the spiritual master with all humility and offer him all services, so that he will be pleased to bestow his blessings upon the disciple. Because a bona fide spiritual master is a representative of Krishna, if he bestows any blessings upon his disciple, that will make the disciple immediately advanced without the disciples following the regulated principles. Or the regulated principles will be easier for one who has served the spiritual master without reservation. Cleanliness is essential for making advancement in spiritual life. There are two kinds of cleanliness, external and internal. External cleanliness means taking a bath, but for internal cleanliness, one has to think of Krishna always and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. This process cleans the accumulated dust of past karma from the mind. Steadiness means that one should be very determined to make progress in spiritual life. Without such determination, one cannot make tangible progress. And self-control means that one should not accept anything which is detrimental to the path of spiritual progress. One should become accustomed to this and reject anything which is against the path of spiritual progress. This is real renunciation. The senses are so strong that they are always anxious to have sense gratification. One should not cater to these demands, which are not necessary. The senses should only be gratified to keep the body fit, so that one can discharge his duty in advancing in spiritual life. The most important and uncontrollable sense is the tongue. If one can control the tongue, then there is every possibility of controlling the other senses. The function of the tongue is to taste and to vibrate. Therefore, by systematic regulation, the tongue should always be engaged in tasting the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Krishna and chanting Hare Krishna. As far as the eyes are concerned, they should not be allowed to see anything but the beautiful form of Krishna. That will control the eyes. Similarly, the ears should be engaged in hearing about Krishna, and the nose in smelling the flowers offered to Krishna. This is the process of devotional service, and it is understood here that Bhagavad-gītā is simply expounding the science of devotional service. Devotional service is the main and sole objective. Unintelligent commentators on the Gita try to divert the mind of the reader to other subjects, but there is no other subject in Bhagavad-gītā but devotional service. False ego means accepting this body as oneself. When one understands that he is not his body and his spirit soul, that is real ego. Ego is there. False ego is condemned, but not real ego. In the Vedic literature it is said, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, I am spirit. This I am, the sense of self, also exists in a liberated stage of self-realization. This sense of I am is ego, but when the sense of I am is applied to this false body, it is false ego. When the sense of self is applied to reality, that is real ego. There are some philosophers who say we should give up our ego, but we cannot give up our ego because ego means identity. We ought, of course, to give up the false identification with the body. One should try to understand the distress of accepting birth, death, old age, and disease. There are descriptions in various Vedic literatures of birth. In the srimad-bhagavatam, the world of the unborn, the child's stay in the womb of the mother, its suffering, etc., are all very graphically described. It should be thoroughly understood that birth is distressful, because we forget how much distress we have suffered within the womb of the mother. We do not make any solution to the repetition of birth and death. Similarly, at the time of death, there are all kinds of sufferings, and they are also mentioned in the authoritative scriptures. These should be discussed, and as far as disease and old age are concerned, everyone gets practical experience. No one wants to be diseased, and no one wants to become old. But there is no avoiding these. Unless we have a pessimistic view of this material life, considering the distresses of birth, death, old age, and disease, there is no impetus for our making advancement in spiritual life. As for detachment from children, wife, and home, it is not meant that one should have no feeling for these. They are natural objects of affection. But when they are not favorable to spiritual progress, then one should not be attached to them. Purport. It is stated here that the Supersoul, who is always with the individual soul, is the representation of the Supreme Lord. He is not an ordinary living entity. Because the monist philosophers take the knower of the body to be one, they think that there is no difference between the Supersoul and the individual soul. To clarify this, the Lord says that He is the representation of Paramatma in every body. He is different from the individual soul. He is para, transcendental. The individual soul enjoys the activities of a particular field. But the Supersoul is present not as finite enjoyer, nor as one taking part in bodily activities, but as the witness, overseer, permitter, and supreme enjoyer. His name is Paramatma, not Atma, and he is transcendental. It is distinctly clear that the Atma and Paramatma are different. The Supersoul, the Paramatma, has legs and hands everywhere, but the individual soul does not. And because he is the Supreme Lord, he is present within to sanction the individual soul's desiring material enjoyment. Without the sanction of the Supreme Soul, the individual soul cannot do anything. The individual is bhakta, or the sustained, and he is bhukta, or the maintainer. There are innumerable living entities, and he is staying in them as a friend. The fact is that individual living entities are eternally part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and both of them are very intimately related as friends. But the living entity has the tendency to reject the sanction of the Supreme Lord and act independently in an attempt to dominate the Supreme Nature. And because he has this tendency, he is called the marginal energy of the Supreme Lord. The living entity can be situated either in the material energy or the spiritual energy. As long as he is conditioned by the material energy, the Supreme Lord as his friend, the Supersoul, stays with him, just to get him to return to the spiritual energy. The Lord is always eager to take him back to the spiritual energy, but due to his minute independence, the individual entity is continually rejecting the association of spiritual light. This misuse of independence is the cause of his material strife in the conditioned nature. The Lord, therefore, is always giving instruction from within and from without. From without, he gives instructions as stated in Bhagavad-gītā, and from within, he tries to convince him that his activities in the material field are not conducive to real happiness. Just give it up and turn your faith toward me. Then you will be happy, he says. Thus, the intelligent person who places his faith in the Paramatma, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, begins to advance toward a blissful, eternal life of knowledge. Text 24. Ya evam veti purusham prakritim cha gunai saha sarvata vartamanopi nasa bhuyo bijayate. Ya, anyone, evam, thus, veti, understands, purusham, the living entities, prakritim, material nature, cha, and, gunai, modes of material nature, saha, with, sarvata, by all means, vartamana, situated, api, in spite of, na, never, sa, he, bhuya, again, abhijayate, takes his birth. Translation. One who understands this philosophy concerning material nature, the living entity, and the interaction of the modes of nature is sure to attain liberation. He will not take birth here again, regardless of his present position. Purport. Clear understanding of material nature, the Supersoul, the individual soul, and their interrelation makes one eligible to become liberated and turn to the spiritual atmosphere without being forced to return to this material nature. This is the result of knowledge. The purpose of knowledge is to understand distinctly that the living entity has by chance fallen into this material existence. By his personal endeavor in association with authorities, saintly persons, and a spiritual master, he has to understand his position and then revert to spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness by understanding Bhagavad-gītā as it is explained by the Personality of Godhead. Then it is certain that he will never come again into this material existence. He will be transferred into the spiritual world for a blissful, eternal life of knowledge. Text 25. Dhyanenatmani pashyanti kechid atmanam atmana anye sankyena yogena karma yogena chapare. Dhyanena, by meditation, atmani, self, pashyanti, see, kechit, one, atmanam, supersoul, atmana, by the mind, anye, others, sankyena, by philosophical discussion, yogena, by the yoga system, karma yogena, by activities without fruitive desire, cha, also, apare, others. Translation. That Supersoul is perceived by some through meditation, by some through the cultivation of knowledge, and by others through working without fruitive desire. Purport. The Lord informs Arjuna that the conditioned soul can be divided into two classes as far as man's search for realization is concerned. Those who are atheists, agnostics, and skeptics are beyond the sense of spiritual understanding. But there are others who are faithful in their understanding of spiritual life, and they are called workers who have renounced fruitive results. Those who always try to establish the doctrine of monism are also counted among the atheists and agnostics. In other words, only the devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are really capable of spiritual understanding, because they understand that beyond this material nature there is the spiritual world and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is expanded as the Paramatma, the Supersoul in everyone, the all-pervading Godhead. Of course, there are those who try to understand the Supreme Absolute Truth by cultivation of knowledge, and they can be counted in the second class. The atheistic philosophers analyzed this material world into 24 elements, and they place the individual soul as the 25th item. When they are able to understand the nature of the individual soul to be transcendental to the material elements, they are able to understand also that above the individual soul there is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the 26th element. Thus gradually they also come to the standard of devotional service in Krishna consciousness. Those who work without fruitive results are also perfect in their attitude. They are given a chance to advance to the platform of devotional service in Krishna consciousness. Here it is stated that there are some people who are pure in consciousness and who try to find out the Supersoul by meditation, and when they discover the Supersoul within themselves, they become transcendentally situated. Similarly, there are others who also try to understand the Supreme Soul by cultivation of knowledge, and there are others who cultivate the Hatha Yoga system and who try to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead by childish activities. Text 26. Anye tvi evam ajananta shrutvanyebhya upasate te pi chati taranti eva mrityum shruti parayana. Anye, others, too, but, evam, this, ajananta, without spiritual knowledge, shrutva, by hearing, anebhya, from others, upasate, begin to worship, te, they, api, also, cha, and, atitaranti, transcend, eva, certainly, mrityum, the path of death, shruti parayana, inclined to the process of hearing. Translation. Again, there are those who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about Him from others. Because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death. Purport. This verse is particularly applicable to modern society, because in modern society there is practically no education in spiritual matters. Some of the people may appear to be atheistic or agnostic or philosophical, but actually there is no knowledge of philosophy. As for the common man, if he is a good soul, then there is a chance for advancement by hearing. This hearing process is very important. Lord Chaitanya, who preached Krishna consciousness in the modern world, gave great stress to hearing, because if the common man simply hears from authoritative sources, he can progress, especially, according to Lord Chaitanya, if he hears the transcendental vibration Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. It is stated, therefore, that all men should take advantage of hearing from realized souls and gradually become able to understand everything. The worship of the Supreme Lord will then undoubtedly take place. Lord Chaitanya has said that in this age no one needs to change his position, but one should give up the endeavor to understand the absolute truth by speculative reasoning. One should learn to become the servant of those who are in knowledge of the Supreme Lord. If one is fortunate enough to take shelter of a pure devotee, hear from him about self-realization, and follow in his footsteps, he will be gradually elevated to the position of a pure devotee. In this verse, particularly, the process of hearing is strongly recommended, and this is very appropriate. Although the common man is often not as capable as so-called philosophers, faithful hearing from an authoritative person will help one transcend this material existence and go back to Godhead, back to home. Text 27. Yavat samjayate kinchit sattvam stavara jangamam kshetragya samyogat tadvidhi bharatarshaba. Yavat, whatever, samjayate, takes place, kinchit, anything, sattvam, existence, stavara, not moving, jangamam, moving, kshetra, the body, kshetragya, knower of the body, samyogat, union between, tat vidhi, you must know it, bharatarshaba, O chief of the Bharats. Translation. O chief of the Bharats, whatever you see in existence, both moving and unmoving, is only the combination of the field of activities and the knower of the field. Purport. Both material nature and the living entity, which were existing before the creation of the cosmos, are explained in this verse. Whatever is created is but a combination of the living entity and material nature. There are many manifestations, like trees, mountains, and hills, which are not moving, and there are many existences which are moving, and all of them are but combinations of material nature and superior nature, the living entity. Without the touch of the superior nature, the living entity, nothing can grow. Therefore, the relationship between matter and nature is eternally going on, and this combination is effected by the Supreme Lord. Therefore, he is the controller of both the superior and inferior natures. The material nature is created by him, and the superior nature is placed in this material nature, and thus all these activities and manifestations take place. Text 28. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshvaram vinashyatva avinashyantam ya pashati sa pashati. Samam, equally, sarveshu, in all, bhuteshu, living entities, tishtantam, residing, Parameshvaram, the Supersoul, Vinashyatsu, in the destructible, Avinashyantam, not destroyed, Ya, anyone, Pashyati, see, Sa, he, Pashyati, actually sees. Translation. One who sees the Supersoul, accompanying the individual soul in all bodies, and who understands that neither the soul nor the Supersoul is ever destroyed, actually sees. Purport. Anyone who can see three things, the body, the proprietor of the body, or individual soul and the friend of the individual soul combined together by good association is actually in knowledge. Those who are not associated with the soul's friend are ignorant. They simply see the body, and when the body is destroyed, they think that everything is finished, but actually it is not so. After the destruction of the body, both the soul and the Supersoul exist, and they go on eternally in many various moving and unmoving forms. The Sanskrit word Parameshvaram is sometimes translated as the individual soul, because the soul is the master of the body, and after the destruction of the body he transfers to another form. In that way, he is master. But there are others who interpret this Parameshvaram to be the Supersoul. In either case, both the Supersoul and the individual soul continue. They are not destroyed. One who can see in this way can actually see what is happening. Text 29. Samam pashyanhi sarvatra samavashtitam ishvaram nahi nasti atmanatmanam tato yati param gatim. Samam, equally, pashyan, seeing, he, certainly, sarvatra, everywhere, samavashtitam, equally situated, ishvaram, supersoul, na, does not, hinasti, degrade, atmana, by the mind, atmanam, the soul, tata yati, then reaches, param, the transcendental, gatim, destination. Translation. One who sees the Supersoul in every living being and equal everywhere does not degrade himself by his mind. Thus he approaches the transcendental destination. Purport. The living entity, by accepting his material existence as just so much suffering, can become situated in his spiritual existence. If one understands that the Supreme is situated in his Paramatma manifestation everywhere, that is, if he can see the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every living thing, he does not degrade himself, and he therefore gradually advances in the spiritual world. The mind is generally addicted to self-centered processes, but when the mind turns to the Supersoul, one becomes advanced in spiritual understanding. Text 30. Prakrit yaiva cha karmani kriyamanani sarvasha ya pashati tatmanam akataram sa pashati. Prakritya, material nature. Eva, certainly. Cha, also. Karmani, activities. Kriya manani, engaged in performing. Sarvasha, in all respects. Ya, anyone who. Pashati, sees. Tata, also. Atmanam, himself. Akartaram, non-doer. Sa, he. Pashati, sees perfectly. Translation. One who can see that all activities are performed by the body, which is created of material nature, and sees that the self does nothing, actually sees. Purport. This body is made by material nature under the direction of the Supersoul, and whatever activities are going on in respect to one's body are not his doing. Whatever one is supposed to do, either for happiness or for distress, one is forced to do because of the bodily constitution. The self, however, is outside all these bodily activities. This body is given according to one's past desires. To fulfill desires, one is given the body, with which he acts accordingly. Practically speaking, the body is a machine, designed by the Supreme Lord to fulfill desires. Because of desires, one is put into difficult circumstances to suffer or to enjoy. This transcendental vision of the living entity, when developed, makes one separate from bodily activities. One who has such a vision is an actual seer. Text 31. Yada bhuta pritag bhavam ekastam anupashati tata eva cha vistaram brahma sampadyate tada. Yada, when, bhuta, living entities, pritak bhavam, separated entities, ekastam, situated in one, anupashati, tries to see through authority, tata eva, thereafter, cha, also, vistaram, expanded, Brahma, the Absolute, sampadyate, attains, tada, at that time. Translation. When a sensible man ceases to see different identities, which are due to different material bodies, he attains to the Brahman conception. Thus he sees that beings are expanded everywhere. Purport. When one can see that the various bodies of living entities arise due to the different desires of the individual soul and do not actually belong to the soul itself, one actually sees. In the material conception of life, we find someone a demigod, someone a human being, a dog, a cat, etc. This is material vision, not actual vision. This material differentiation is due to a material conception of life. After the destruction of the material body, this spirit soul is one. The spirit soul, due to contact with material nature, gets different types of bodies. When one can see this, he attains spiritual vision, thus being freed from differentiations like man, animal, big, low, etc. One becomes beautified in his consciousness and able to develop a Krishna consciousness in his spiritual identity. How he then sees things will be explained in the next verse. Text 32. Anadidvan nirgunatvat paramatmayam avyaya sharirastopi konteya na karoti na lipyate. Anaditvat, due to eternity. Nirgunatvat, due to transcendental. Param, beyond material nature. Atma, spirit. Ayam, this. Avyaya, inexhaustible. Sharira sta, api, though dwelling in the body. Konteya, O son of Kunti. Na karoti, never does anything. Na lipyate, nor is he entangled. Translation. Those with the vision of eternity can see that the soul is transcendental, eternal, and beyond the modes of nature. Despite contact with the material body, O Arjuna, the soul neither does anything, nor is entangled. Purport. A living entity appears to be born because of the birth of the material body, but actually the living entity is eternal. He is not born, and in spite of his being situated in a material body, he is transcendental and eternal. Thus he cannot be destroyed. By nature he is full of bliss. He does not engage himself in any material activities. Therefore, the activities performed due to his contact with material bodies do not entangle him. Text 33. Yata sarvagatam sokshmyad akasham no palipyate sarvatra vashtito dehe tatatma no palipyate. Yata, as, sarvagatam, all-pervading, sokshmyat, due to being subtle, Akasham, the sky. Na, never. Upalipyate, mixes. Sarvatra, everywhere. Avashtita, situated. Dehe, in the body. Tata, such. Atma, the self. Na, never. Upalipyate, mixes. Translation. The sky, due to its subtle nature, does not mix with anything, although it is all-pervading. Similarly, the soul, situated in Brahman vision, does not mix with the body, though situated in that body. Purport. The air enters into water, mud, stool, and whatever else is there. Still, it does not mix with anything. Similarly, the living entity, even though situated in varieties of bodies, is aloof from them due to his subtle nature. Therefore, it is impossible to see with the material eyes how the living entity is in contact with this body, and how he is out of it after the destruction of the body. No one in science can ascertain this. Text 34. Yata prakashyayati eka kritsnam lokam imam ravi kshetram kshetri tata kritsnam prakashayati bharata. Yata, as. Prakashayati, illuminates. Eka, one. Kritsnam, the whole. Lokam, universe. Imam, this. Ravi, the sun. Kshetram, this body. Kshetri, the soul. Tata, similarly. Kritsnam, all. Prakashayati, illuminates. Bharata, O son of Bharat. Translation. O son of Bharat, as the sun alone illuminates all this universe, so does the living entity, one within the body, illuminate the entire body by consciousness. Purport. There are various theories regarding consciousness. Here in Bhagavad-gītā, the example of the sun and the sunshine is given. As the sun is situated in one place, but is illuminating the whole universe, so a small particle of spirit soul, although situated in the heart of this body, is illuminating the whole body by consciousness. This consciousness is the proof of the presence of the soul, as sunshine or light is the proof of the presence of the sun. When the soul is present in the body, there is consciousness all over the body, and as soon as the soul is passed from the body, there is no more consciousness. This can be easily understood by any intelligent man. Therefore, consciousness is not a production of the combinations of matter. It is the symptom of the living entity. The consciousness of the living entity, although qualitatively one with the Supreme Consciousness, is not supreme, because the consciousness of one particular body does not share that of another body. But the Supersoul, which is situated in all bodies as the friend of the individual soul, is conscious of all bodies. That is the difference between supreme consciousness and individual consciousness. Text 35. Kshetra kshetra gayor evam antaram jnana chakshusha bhuta prakriti moksham cha ye vidur yanti te param. Kshetra, body. Kshetra gyayo, of the proprietor of the body. Evam, that. Antaram, difference. Jnana chakshusha, by vision of knowledge. Bhuta, living entity. Prakriti, material nature. Moksham, liberation. Cha, also. Ye, one who. Vidhu, knows. Yanti, approaches. Te, they. Param, supreme. Translation. One who knowingly sees this difference between the body and the owner of the body, and can understand the process of liberation from this bondage also attains to the supreme goal. Purport. The purport of this 13th chapter is that one should know the distinction between the body, the owner of the body, and the Supersoul. A faithful person should at first have some good association to hear of God, and thus gradually become enlightened. If one accepts a spiritual master, he can learn to distinguish between matter and spirit, and that becomes the stepping stone for further spiritual realization. A spiritual master teaches his students to get free from the material concept of life by various instructions. For instance, in Bhagavad-gītā we find Krishna instructing Arjuna to free him from materialistic considerations. One can understand that this body is matter. It can be analyzed with its 24 elements. That is the gross manifestation. And the subtle manifestation is the mind and psychological effects. And the symptoms of life are the interaction of these features. But over and above this, there is the soul, and there is also the Supersoul. The soul and the Supersoul are two. This material world is working by the conjunction of the soul and the 24 material elements. One who can see the constitution of the whole material manifestation as this combination of the soul and material elements, and also can see the situation of the Supreme Soul, becomes eligible for transfer to the spiritual world. These things are meant for contemplation and for realization, and one should have a complete understanding of this chapter with the help of the spiritual master. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 13th chapter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam in the matter of nature, the enjoyer, and consciousness.